Hello, my name is Martin Redfern, and I'm here today to show you a board game that I've created called Race to the Pole. This idea came to me about 4 or 5 months ago, and it's really born of my fascination with the what I would call the golden age of exploration, which happened a little over 100 years ago, in the years leading up to the First World War. At that time, people were somewhat obsessed with reaching places like the North Pole and the South Pole and the top of Mount Everest. They were forever exploring new places and writing gripping articles for newspapers about their exploits. Individuals tried to make themselves famous and to raise money for these expeditions. And some of these names you will know: Amundsen, Scott, Peary, people who really captured the imagination of the world during the golden age of exploration. One of the things that they were trying to do in this time was to reach the South Pole. The South Pole was a particularly romantic idea because it was a long way away from everybody. It took weeks by boat to get there. You were lucky if you could even get there, because often your boat would be crushed by ice, as happened to Shackleton, another famous explorer. And it was distant and forbidding, largely empty. There's very little wildlife in the Antarctic compared to the Arctic. And getting to the South Pole became an obsession for many people. There were, in fact, 6 countries or more that sent expeditions to the South Pole, certainly to the Antarctic, around this time. And there was competition between countries to see who could get to the pole first. And that's what my game is about. It's about the race to the pole, as you can see here, and it essentially pits up to 6 countries against each other in a race to reach the South Pole. I'll show you a little bit about the game and why I think it's worth playing, because I think it is. Inside this box is everything that goes into the game. What we have here is a game board. We have a set of game pieces, some cards. They're a bit like chance or community chest in Monopoly, in the sense that they can be good or bad news, depending on what the card is, and you often have to deal with them. In addition to the board, we have a spinner, which determines how fast you go or how far you go. And up top here, we have the instructions. Now, what you may see here is that it's an envelope. It's marked confidential, sealed closed. But when you open it up, what you find are the instructions for the game, which are quite short. Only, actually, I'll take out the sheet, only about 4 pages, half pages indeed, that explain the rules of the game. They're very simple and really easy for anybody to learn. And there's a lot that goes on within the game that doesn't require you to understand the rules. It just kind of happens. As you'll see, I'll take you through it. In addition to the instructions, there is also information for each of the teams. The French team, in this case, the British team, and the Swedish team. On the other side, the Japanese team, the German team, and the Norwegian team. It tells you who your leader is, what ship you came on, and maybe a few other details as well. These are important things to know in the game. You may be asked. There may be a quiz. Let's have a look at the game board itself. It's just held in place with a couple of elastic cords. Take it out, move the box to the side for a moment. And I'm going to zoom in on it so we get a better look at this. Okay. This game board is obviously, or maybe it's not obvious, it's in the shape of Antarctica itself. Antarctica is roughly this shape when you take into account the ice sheets. Underneath all that, there is land. In fact, Antarctica is really 2 islands, more so than a single continent. But with the ice, it becomes this shape that we all know. And this is essentially the bottom of the world. When we look at this, we're looking at the very bottom of the world. This map of Antarctica, reasonably accurate. I mean, I looked at a lot of maps to make this. You notice this point here. Imagine that's pointing essentially at Argentina and Chile, the bottom of South America. And on this side, over here, we're essentially pointing towards New Zealand and Australia as we move up through the globe. From this point here, which is the South Pole, everything is north. Everybody is north. Now, to get to the South Pole, of course, people had to travel by foot. They had to bring supplies with them. They had to be able to sleep in very cold temperatures and feed themselves and keep going day after day. This was an enormous challenge, and some people didn't survive. And there are a lot of heroic stories that you can read about what happened. But we're simulating that in this game with a map of Antarctic and a spinner, which goes on that little peninsula that I mentioned that points towards South America. And we have 6 countries, and we also have 6 starting points. So you can see, if you look at my board, that there is a starting point called Sipple, that's Sipple Island, one called Ross, which is the Ross ice sheet, a Daly land, that was actually where the French first made contact with Antarctica, Wilkes, Enderby, and Brunt. Brunt is an ice shelf as well, so there's a lot of ice here too. And these base camps are essentially the ports. This is how you get onto Antarctica and how you get off Antarctica in the game. Again, around 1910. Things have changed a bit at the bottom of the world since then. Let's have a look at the game pieces, which there are a lot. But essentially what you're seeing here is 2 things. One is pins, game pins, and the other is this little item here. This is a sled, or a sledge, as our South Pole explorers would have called it, a sledge. And with that sledge, they would have pulled all of their supplies and all of their equipment across this giant Antarctic ice sheet to the pole and back again. Sometimes pulled by dogs, sometimes pulled by ponies, although not successfully, and often pulled by just people. With a rope over their shoulders, they would pull a sledge behind them that had their supplies. So in addition to our sledge, we have supplies, also made of wood, that have to be carried to the North Pole, to the South Pole, as they march along. Either their dogs or them must pull these items with them. This would include food, drinking water, tents, all that stuff. Some of the challenges in the game, some of the things you are asked to do in order to make progress, involve this sled. You have to move it around without it falling over. You have to make towers of items. You have to balance items on top of each other. Sometimes you have to do it without looking, with your eyes closed. That's a physical challenge, this part of the game. And it's often quite fun and difficult. Sometimes it would be just you. Sometimes everybody would have to try to succeed at that challenge. The pins are how we keep track of the game. And if you've played cribbage or seen people play cribbage, you'll recognize what's going on here, because we have holes on the board and we have pins. I'm just going to take you in here to show you a little bit more closely how this works. As I said, we have base camps ranging from Brunt, Enderby, Wilkes, and so on. That's where you can start. Everybody picks a starting point. There's no advantage to any particular starting point. They're all the same distance from the pole. But let us take, say, the French, with the blue, white, and red. We'll say they start from Enderby. And then we will take, for example, the Germans, the famous German flag colors, and they will leave from Brunt. We'll just do that for now. So here they are. They're setting off for the pole, and they're equal distances away. They will spin the spinner, which is here, and it will tell them how many they get to move. But that's only a very small part of how the game works. So in this case, for example, perhaps the French team gets to move 2. But before they get to do that, they have to have read what we call a Hands of Fate card, because Hands of Fate control a lot. They're a bit like Community Chest in Monopoly or Chance, and every time you play, you have to read one of these, or someone will read it for you, and it will tell you In this case, for example, a base camp has run into trouble. The dogs are running amok and it's going to be closed. So a base camp has been closed, and the person who reads this card or gets this card chooses which base camp will be closed. So they would, of course, competitively choose to close a base camp that somebody else needs. Now, a key point about the game is that you don't need to come back to the base camp where you start. In fact, you may very well end up coming back to a different base camp. That's fine, because you can still get off the Antarctic continent and go and tell everyone about your great success. But at various times, ports will get closed. Sometimes they will get reopened. This makes it somewhat unpredictable, which is kind of what we were looking for when we designed this, to make it unpredictable and interesting. So you've seen the black marks are our base camps. Now let's have a look at some of the other colors. There are green pins, you will notice, which are in fact food caches. There are 4 of these when the game starts. So you have 4 food caches that you start off with, and from there people can use them. If you cross over a green pin on your way somewhere, then you remove the pin, but you get an extra spin of the spinner. So it's a little advantage you might get. At various times, you will actually get the opportunity to place a block, and the block are the red pins. Now what you'll notice is that we have 3 circles in the game, and each of those circles can only reach the next circle where there are red marks. So we have one circle that has 4 entry points to a second circle, which has 3 entry points to a third circle. And the red pins are placed strategically when you get the chance to block other people from getting to where they want to go. So, for example, now France cannot move in the obvious course to get to the second circle. But the good news is, almost as often you will get the opportunity to remove pins from the red slots. So when you get the chance, you could either place a red pin or remove it. So maybe France will get the chance to remove that red pin, but then maybe somebody else will put it back. As you can see, it would get quite competitive and interesting and challenging as you go through, with these red pins arriving and disappearing, and with the black pins arriving and disappearing. So it gets competitive, and everything changes quite rapidly as you have to plot new paths to get off the continent once you have reached the South Pole and are on your way back. Overall, that's essentially the game. The Hands of Fate cards are intended to be funny. They do make light of the sort of troubles people get into when they're trying this type of expedition. There's also a level of strategy with the red pins and the black pins, and deciding where you want to place them and who you will help and who you will block. And there are also physical challenges, mental challenges, memory challenges that are included in the cards that will give you advantages or disadvantages depending on how you do them. And they're all supposed to be the sort of thing that anybody could do. This is not for adults or for children. If you are not particularly good at memory, that's okay, because there's other types of challenges that you will have. If you're not particularly dexterous with your fingers and you keep knocking over the sled full of supplies, no problem, because there's also mental challenges that you'll be able to succeed at. Something for everybody, in other words. And all of it adds up to the same heroic goal, which is to make it to the pole and back in one piece and be known as the hero who conquered the South Pole. Just quickly, I'm going to zoom out to show you the game in its entirety. We have our board, we have our spinner. These are made of solid wood. We have the sled and the cargo, also made of solid wood, in this case walnut, I believe, possibly ebony. We have the game box itself, which is essentially wallpapered, if you will, with headlines from the time that people were reading while wondering what was happening. Some of these were in fact wrong. They got information that was absolutely inaccurate about who had reached the pole and who hadn't, and how people were doing. Astonishingly difficult time to really know what was going on, and you can only imagine the families of these explorers hanging on every word, um, hoping to hear some news. So I'm hoping that people out there, some people will want to join me in reliving the golden age of exploration on the South Pole, and will want to try to reach the South Pole and come home, become the hero that conquered the South Pole and brought glory to yourself and to your country in the year of 1910, and thwarted the plans of others to bring glory to their country and to make themselves heroes. That was what it was all about in 1910, and hopefully this game evokes that. So if you're interested, by all means message me. Visit the website, which is RaceToThePole.ca, all one word, RaceToThePole.ca. And you can learn more about it, see some pictures, and read more about the game that we've created. I say we, it's basically me, with a little bit of advice. And when I say we created it, or I created it, this is all handmade. The headlines, the wood, the pins, the spinner, the cargo, the cards, the instructions, all of that was made by me. Much trial and error went into finding the right ways to do these things. The only thing I didn't make was the paper and the cardboard box. But besides that, this is all handmade. So each one is different, each one is unique. The boards are not the same. Some are in walnut, some are in oak, some are in ash, some are in quite exotic woods. So it's unique, one of a kind of game. And right now there's only 10 copies in existence, although I'm certainly happy to make more if by chance it proves to be popular with people. So thanks for watching, and welcome to the South Pole.